Well, hello again. Thought I would do a quick video on just the initial tune that you do with a copter, because it can be quite hard getting copters off the ground, particularly when you got a lot of shaking. And I did this recently, and obviously everybody wants to get to auto tune to get a really good tune, but sometimes it can be hard to get to that stage without crashing. So I thought I'd show you the way I did it just recently. There's many ways to do this, but I will characterize this as the log method. So I'm not going to show you any flying copters, but I will. So I've got a log from a copter, and it's a Calibro QAV 250, so 5-inch quad. And if we have a look at the PIDs, we're really talking about the PIDs here in particular. So if I just bring the PIDs up, here we go. So let me just a little bit bigger. There we go. Okay. So let's have a look at the PIDs that we got here. And the PIDs are, this is a full parameter list. Mission Planner has this nice little capability of giving you a tree navigation. And so the PIDs for copter are all under ATC for attitude control, and ATC RAT. So attitude control, and these are the rate PIDs. And if I look at, so we'll start with roll. If I look at roll to start with, you can see that these are set to defaults. 0.135 for I, 0.135 for P, and then D set to 0.0036. So these are the PIDs that come by default with copter, and they fly really well on the old 3DR X4. So that's a copter with 10-inch props, so a lot bigger than the copter I'm flying. And what you find is that generally for smaller copters, they've got a higher power to rate ratio, and so you need smaller PIDs to get the same degree of control. So generally smaller copters need smaller PIDs. Now I did actually try flying this. So one thing to say before you do any of this, you obviously need to do basic setup, and basic setup includes you basically want to make sure you run the little wizard that Mission Planner has. Under setup, there's a wizard you can run, and that will allow you to set some of the basic settings around filters and so on for the size of quad that you've got. But it doesn't do much with the PIDs, I don't think. So I think it basically sets some of the other parameters. I'll probably just show it here somewhere. That's well, maybe I'll leave that for another time. But I'm just going to sort of talk about these basic PIDs. So if I look at the log, so I flew this very briefly. It was highly unstable, and let's just hide this guy again. So let's have a look at the log. So this is the log from the first flight. And what I'm going to look at is rate. So the rate outputs are a good source of information about the stability or otherwise of your copter. I mean, there are other sources, but this is a good sort of go-to point. And in particular, the output. So these are scaled outputs. So R out is roll out, P out is pitch out, Y out is yaw out, and then A out is essentially the throttle out. So if we have a look at each of these, roll out, pitch out, and yaw out, you can immediately see that there's a massive amount of oscillation here in the flying period. If I plot throttle on the, yeah, okay, so you can see I've raised the throttle here and I raised the throttle here. So you can see when it raised the throttle and the copter was off the ground, there's a massive amount of oscillation on both roll and pitch. not on yaw, interestingly, so you can see yaw, this blue line here, not too bad. But roll and pitch, massive amounts of oscillation, particularly on roll. And if you see oscillation like this, the first thing you need to do is reduce the PIDs. And you want to reduce the PIDs in proportion to each other. So you generally want to reduce P and D at the same rate. And so when I saw this, what I did immediately was, so I saw yaw was okay, and so I basically reduced the PIDs from that by 50%, so I halved them. Now, one thing to note is that on this log, I don't have PID logging turned on. So if I look at we go back to our parameters here. If I can make this visible. There you go. Okay, so back to the parameters and look at log bit mask. You can see that this bit mask, so I've got this bit mask of 176.126, this is the default, and by default you don't have PID logging on because it's a little bit higher rate, but PID logging is really useful when you want to set, when you want to see what's going on, and so there's a little set bit mask option, you can click that. You won't be able to see that, but you can basically select PID logging there, and that will be able to allow you to see what's going on. So I reduced, so let me hide that, and let me look at the other graph now. So I looked, so I reduced the PIDs by half, and that gave me this graph. So let's see if I can switch to that one. There we go. Okay, so and then I'm going to close this PIDs, open the other PIDs, and just have a quick look at what's showing here. Okay, so there we go. So there's the PIDs for the new log. And if I look at ATC, rate, pitch, you can see that I've reduced P by roughly half. So it's roughly half, 0.075. And I've reduced D to roughly half. I didn't worry about too much. It doesn't, you know, I could make I the same as P, but it doesn't really matter too much for this kind of test. And similarly for roll, I did the same thing for roll, and then yaw I left alone. So that's what the new outputs look like. And if we look at throttle, so here's the little hover, and then I look at the rate outputs, so roll, pitch, yaw, and now you can see it's looking a lot better. So so blue here is pitch, which still looks like it's got a bit of oscillation. Green is roll, which doesn't look too bad, and yaw doesn't look too bad. So blue oscillation on pitch, not too bad on roll and yaw. And actually, now that you can see I've got PID logging on here, so if I look at the PID logging, P and D, so what you can see here is that D is driving this oscillation. So D is, let me remove these events. So D is the blue and P is the green. And D is much bigger than P. Normally these should be similar sizes, or maybe D even a bit smaller than P, but you got D much bigger than P like this, it means that D is driving the oscillation, and so D is too high. If I similarly look at roll, P and D, you can see for roll it's a much better story. I mean, D's a little bit higher, but not too bad. Pitch is P is a little bit lower, but in general the problem is not on roll, it's on pitch. So if I go back to the pitch settings, so there we go, this was yaw, I get to pitch here. So you can see I've got P 0.075, I've got D at 0.0015. And so what I did was I dropped D a little bit more, and I dropped it by, I think, 30%, so to 0.001 instead of 0.0015. It's all very approximate, but you can see that D was driving it, and drop it 30%, 25% is probably okay. And then I won't show the last graph, but it looked pretty good after that. And at that point, it wasn't super controllable, a bit soft, but what I wanted was something that wasn't unstable. And at that point, it was stable enough to try running auto-tune. All right, so that is just a very, very quick rundown of how I used logging to determine what to set my PIDs to get a somewhat stable tune before running auto-tune. Now, if you've got scripting, you could also run, there's a VTOL quick tune script that Tridge wrote that will get you quite quickly to a much better set of PIDs, but obviously you've got to have the thing flying before you can run that. And once you've, and if you don't have scripting, you can go straight to auto-tune, but if, you know, VTOL quick tune is quite a safe way to get to sort of a bit more locked in, and then at that point you should be very safe to run it auto-tune. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. Thought I'd rattle that off before I go flying. Thanks for watching.